Okay, so as we said before, welcome to creative writing. This is a 15-week course. It will be every Wednesday evening, just like tonight. It's offline. It will be here at the school, and it's open to anyone who wants to participate, anyone who wants to learn and improve their writing. So let's take a look. If we're talking about storytelling and what it is, I will open this presentation. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, I don't need the audio. Okay. All right. So first of all, it says storytelling. So who can tell me what is storytelling? What do we mean when we talk about storytelling?
It's not a true story about anything like fairies, people, dogs, whoever.
Okay, exactly. It can be about anything. It might be about people. It might be about animals. If we take a look here, it says, what is storytelling? It says, from myths and legends to novels, poems, and fairy tales, storytelling is how we understand the world and ourselves. So if we talk about myths and legends, could someone tell me, yes, I can't see your name right now. You're raising your hand. I see you have blonde hair and glasses. Could you tell me?
Myths, legends, it might not be true always, but it's what people have been telling through the time to each other.
Yes, exactly right. So these kind of stories which are passed down over time, kind of from parents to children, from teachers to students, and they continue through these generations. So it says, in this course, we will explore how to tell stories, looking at examples from iambic pentameter of Shakespeare. And iambic pentameter, it's just a kind of a rhythm, a style of writing poems from English literature years ago to contemporary internet fan fiction and blogging. So, of course, in any kind of class about storytelling, we'll talk about books, we'll talk about poems and essays, but also there's so many ways now that we all use the internet to read, to communicate, to express ourselves. And we'll talk about some of these things during the course too. So it says that students, all of you, will learn to create, edit, critique, and develop stories, both fiction and nonfiction. Okay, so you'll get a chance to work with other students. You'll get a chance to write something, to do some kind of creative activities, to get some kind of feedback, some ideas about how you can improve your writing. And we'll be talking about these things all through the 15 weeks of the course. So if we look first at some of these examples, myths and legends. As Anastasia told us, myths and legends are the kind of stories that have been developed, that have been shared, that have been kind of passed through time. So, I mean, some of these are examples like fairy tales. So, fairy tales can be each culture has its own fairy tales. Baba Yaga, for example, or in Europe, some stories, Little Red Riding Hood, which I think you know by a similar name in Russian. But fairy tales are kind of part of myths and legends. There's also urban legends. Urban legends. Does anyone know what I mean when I say urban legends? Urban is an adjective which means in the city. So can anyone tell me, does anyone know this phrase urban legends?
Maybe it's a kind of legend of a specific city or, I don't know, house, place.
Yes, Maria, thank you. Exactly right. Can you think of any example of this kind of an urban legend, like you said, of a specific city or place?
Maybe, for example, I don't know the specific example. Maybe the historic museum, or something that in the center of the Moscow.
Okay, in the center of Moscow. Okay, yes, I've also heard of. It's a kind of an urban legend, maybe true, maybe not true, about like a library under the ground. Ivan Grozny had kept these ancient books. This could be an example of an urban legend, a kind of story about a city, which may be true, maybe not, but it's kind of been told over the years. Then we have this cultural myths.
For example,
I'm sorry?
crocodile in New York?
Yes?
Like crocodiles in New York canalization. Like
yes. Okay, right. The crocodiles under the ground in New York, yes. I think every city has some of these kind of examples, some of these stories which no one knows where they began or how they began, but they kind of are developed and passed down through time. Then, okay, we see magic, which sometimes is connected with fairy tale stories, sometimes with urban legends. When we say cultural myths and folklore, can anybody tell me what would be different about cultural myths and folklore from, for example, fairy tales?
Like folklore is almost like theater. Theaters, they have folklore about the national culture. Like Baba Yaga is the character of Russian folklore.
Okay, so yes, they can be connected. I think that, yes, folklore, it belongs to one country. It belongs to one culture. So if Baba Yaga, some examples which come from Russian folklore, some of these stories which have been developed for many years, and there are some kind of fairy tales which are in many countries. They're not specific to one culture. So, but myths and folklore are about one culture, one country. Okay, also in this kind of category of myths and legends, we have fantasy. And fantasy can be in books, fantasy can be in films or in theater. Can anyone tell me an example of maybe a book or a film which we could say is an example of fantasy?
Harry Potter?
Yes, Harry Potter is an example. Yes, Anastasia?
Kir Bulachov about a girl named Alisa.
Okay, so this is a good example, also an example of fantasy. Here, this section, fake news. This could also connect kind of with the nonfiction or journalism section, kind of about some, as we said, urban legends, maybe true, maybe not true. It could also be in kind of news stories. And so we'll talk about that a little bit in talking about nonfiction and journalism also. So I might have said that this course will be in 3 parts. The first part about fiction and the different genres of fiction and how we can write stories and poems. The second part is nonfiction. This is more kind of academic writing, things that maybe will be helpful for writing for school, writing for maybe future jobs. And then journalism is about kind of reporting. So we'll talk about each of these sections. We'll get to each of these things. Okay, so if we said that fairy tales, myths, folklore have been passed down through stories told to people for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, but now in the last 30 years, with the internet, with all of the media and technology that we have now, there are some kind of new ways of storytelling also. So I think that you all know kind of bloggers, vloggers, video blogs. What about fan fiction? Would somebody tell me what I mean if I say fan fiction?
Like fanfic, maybe.
Uh-huh. Well, could you describe a little bit? Can you give me an idea of
like fake stories about famous people?
Well, it could be famous people, or it could be kind of from a film or from a book or series which already exists. It's like people writing stories about these heroes or about these characters. So it may be characters from a film which is already a real film, but people kind of create their own stories. And they might put these online and other people discuss them. Okay, I'm sure that you are all familiar with the next word, although it's pronounced a little bit differently in English, memes. What is a meme?
It could be like a funny picture that it's very popular on the internet, and I think that there are a lot of memes, and I think that every person know maybe one meme or two, even adults. Yes. So.
Yes. Okay. So thank you, Alexandra. Exactly. It's a kind of picture, something funny with some text, and we can see these all the time on the internet, on social media. And social media, of course, we're talking about Instagram, about Facebook, about Contacto, about WhatsApp, Telegram, all of these social media, anything that we use to communicate with each other. And podcasts. So podcasts just that we listen to. What is different from a radio show to a podcast?
You don't have the video line when you watch a video show or podcast. When you listen to a podcast, you don't have any video, like only the recording of them talking in the studio.
Okay. So it's different from a video because we have nothing visual. We don't see anything. We're just listening. How is it different from radio?
Podcast is recorded, I guess, and radio is live in 80% of the program.
Okay.
Radio program.
Yes, thank you, Max. Exactly right. So that with radio, we're usually listening to it live. Podcasts can be pre-recorded. We can listen to them at any time. Okay, so we'll talk about these and also maybe about deep fakes. Some of you might have heard about this. It's when we're looking at a video and it looks like a real video, but maybe it's not. Maybe a person seems to be speaking, but they're not really saying what the audio is. So we'll talk a little bit about this as well. This is something kind of connected with this early topic of fake news. But so, I mean, we have kind of this older style of storytelling, these newer style of storytelling. Of course, memes are maybe the shortest form of storytelling, just maybe one sentence, sometimes even one word and a picture. Okay, so let's start by talking about this fiction module, the first 4-week course that we'll be doing. So if we say that fiction is a story created by an author. So in the story, we can have characters. These are our heroes. We have a setting, where and when the story happened. We have a plot, what happens, each step by step of the story. And we'll talk about those steps. And we can have different genres, different types of fiction stories. They may be novels, they may be short stories, but there's examples like romance, fantasy, science fiction, detective, mystery, horror, literary fiction. This is another way to say kind of like classical literature, or it could be some kind of like serious modern literature. It's something like drama. but we use drama more to talk about films and about theater. So if we talk about any of these different genres, if we talk about horror or we talk about romance, there are some common elements. There are some kind of parts of the story, and they might not always happen in the same order, but we can say almost all stories have some of these elements. So the first we can say is the background. This is when we get to meet the characters, the main heroes of the story. We get some idea about what's happening, what we're watching, and the setting, we said, is when and where the story takes place. So, okay, we're introduced to these characters. We start to kind of get to know them, get a feeling for what their life is like. And then we usually have a kind of conflict, something. It might be between two of these characters. It might be a problem that they are facing in their life, but some kind of conflict that makes the story start to move. So this part we can call rising action. It says this includes the events leading up to the main problem or conflict. These are kind of like the things which are pushing the story forward. And we'll talk about all of these kind of examples of rising action during the course. I'll show you one example in just a minute. But the kind of peak, the high point, the main point of the story is what we call the climax. So we can see it's kind of like the story is going up, it's growing, and it's going to this point. And so after this, after we see kind of the main part of the story, we start to see kind of, we could say, falling action. Let me just move your faces over to the left here. So falling action, it's when kind of the problem starts to be solved, the life begins to return to normal, and the resolution is the ending of the story. So sometimes it's a happy ending, sometimes it's a tragic ending, sometimes it's a funny ending, but we could call all of these endings a resolution, the end of the story. So let's just look at an example. I chose a common story that I think most of you might know. And so let's take a look. So this is from the movie Titanic, which is now about 20 or 25 years old. But I think most of you probably know this story, even if you haven't seen the film. So let's look at the steps. The background, first of all. We said the background is the introduction of the story. It says that we see Rose, a rich young woman, and Jack, a poor young man, on the Titanic as it gets ready to sail. So sailing, it's like when the boat starts to go out on the sea or on the ocean. So we get introduced to these characters. We start to get a feeling for their life. Okay. The next part. So we said after the background, after the introduction, after we start to get a sense of what the story is about, then I'll move this again here. It says inciting incident. So incite, it's kind of to start some conflict. We said that most stories have a kind of conflict. So an inciting incident. What starts this conflict? What begins the story? The inciting incident and rising action. So we see, it says that Rose is unhappy with having to marry a cruel man, and she decides to kill herself. So she goes to the edge of the boat. She's going to jump into the water. And then this character that we saw, Jack, decides to save her. So they start to talk, they start to spend time together, and soon they fall in love. So now the action is rising. Now the events that are going towards the climax start to happen. So they fall in love. But we know that she is supposed to marry another man. And we know that she is from this rich society. And we know that this character, Jack, is very poor. So we understand that there are going to be some problems. We're waiting to see what will happen as we're watching this love story. It says that Rose's mother and the man she is supposed to marry try to stop them. So each of these actions is kind of getting closer and closer and closer and closer to this climax. So even if you didn't see the film, probably I think all of you might know what the climax of the story is. Let's see. Let's ask someone that we haven't heard from yet. Vladimir, do you know what is the climax of the Titanic story?
The iceberg hits the ship and it starts to sink.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end,
okay. Okay, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. So the ship or the boat hits the iceberg and starts to sink, exactly like you said. So now this is the main point of the story. This is the climax of the story. So it says that rather than take a boat to safety, Rose decides to stay with Jack. So we've been watching their relationship. We've been watching them spend time together. And now we start to see this decision. She's not going to go with this rich man, but she's going to stay with Jack. But the boat is in the middle of the ocean. The boat, as you said, is sinking and going down. And soon they're in the water. And it says, to save Rose's life, Jack slips under the water and drowns. So he dies from the cold water and from not being able to swim. It says we see. So now we have the falling action. We've seen the main part of the story. The ship sank. They tried to go together. Jack died trying to save her. And now the action, the tension from the story is going down. It says we see that Rose has survived. So she lived through this disaster, but she is heartbroken. So now this emotion, which was getting higher and higher for the whole story, it starts to go down again. And we see in the end of the story, the resolution, we see that Rose is now an old woman, but she never forgot her first love. She never forgot Jack and the story of how they met, their experience on the Titanic. So this is just one example. We can look at short stories, we can look at longer stories, films, novels, and we can see these elements in different ways, sometimes even in different order, but almost all stories have these elements. We'll look at some examples and we'll look on how we can use these things in our stories when we're writing something. Okay, so that's about the first module. That's about fiction, when we're writing short stories, novels, poems. The second part, this will be weeks, I think 6, 7, 8, 9. This is non-fiction writing. So who will tell me? I'd like to hear again from someone who hasn't spoken very much. Let's see. Okay, let me see. Varvara, would you tell me what is nonfiction?
Nonfiction is a story that could be like happen in real life.
Yes, exactly right. So it could be a kind of story that happened in real life. Like an example, history. Any kind of history that we're reading about the past, it's an example of nonfiction. Or biography, when we read about the story of a person's life, this is also nonfiction. If I write a story about my own life, I write my own life story, what is that called?
Biography.
I think I heard, I don't know who said it, but
biography.
Biography. Well, this makes sense. It's logical. Okay, it makes sense. It's 2 words. If I write my own story, we might call this a memoir or autobiography. So any of these are nonfiction. History, biography, and autobiography doesn't have to be only a book that talks about your whole life. Some of you, when you're applying for universities in a year or 2 years, or maybe 5 years, you might be asked to write a personal essay. They want to know a little bit about your life and a little bit about why you're interested in studying with their program. And we'll talk about these too. This can be autobiography too. It may be just one page. It may be kind of a short text, but it's still a kind of autobiography, talking about your life. And this is a very useful skill to have, especially if you're applying to some programs in a foreign university. We said also travel writing, academic, so writing anything for school and anything for university. If you're writing for your diploma, you're defending your dissertation in university, these are all useful skills to have. Professional nonfiction writing. This is writing emails. This is writing a memo or a kind of text that you can give to your colleagues. This could be writing some promotional materials, like we can say advertisement or advertisement. This is, of course, to sell something, to promote something. We see these everywhere, from Instagram to TV to magazines. We'll talk about this as well. I mean, even if you're not planning on working in marketing, we're all kind of in some ways promoting something. It can be useful if you're looking for a job. It can be useful if you try to start your own business and you're selling something on Instagram, for example, and blogs. So these are all parts of nonfiction writing, and we see examples of this everywhere. Okay. First example, like we said, history. It tells us about what happened. It gives us the main events, the main people, what happened, where it happened, when it happened, how it affected the future. Okay, we can see an example here. This is a biography, or maybe a collection of letters, which we can see. We see letters that a person wrote to someone that they love. Okay, a textbook. This is also nonfiction writing. So all of you in school have read textbooks, read this example of nonfiction. And we can see also here an Instagram post. So this is for a company, for Nordstrom, but it's also in our own posts, in the things that we put on the internet, the things that we share on social media. It's a useful skill when we just want to express our ideas, when we want to share something. We're using nonfiction writing. Okay, so this says nonfiction is all about description. What's in this photo? So what I want you to do, each of you, is I will give you 2 minutes. I just want you to look at the photo. I want you to just think about what you see, how you could describe it, and then I will ask a few of you to tell me what's in the photo. So I will give you 2 minutes. It's now 5:28. I'll give you 2 minutes to look at the photo, to decide what you see, and then in 2 minutes at 5:30, I'll ask you, what's this photo all about? So you can begin. I'll give you 2 minutes. Okay. All right. So, Lydia, could you tell me what do you see in this photo?
I can see the black and white picture with a woman in the middle of the picture. She has got a black dress. Also, I can see three gentlemen. The one gentleman is looking to the woman.
Okay, looking at the woman.
Yeah, they are all serious.
Okay, they're all serious. Very good. Yes, Anastasia?
I think that maybe that this woman is quite famous.
Okay.
And maybe she has got an interview.
Okay.
And the man with the camera makes photos of her. And yes.
Okay. All right. So maybe she's famous. Maybe she's doing an interview, and the man is taking photos of her. Okay. So these could all be good points. These may all be true.
Discuss some questions, for example, also.
Okay. Such as what could be a kind of question?
What could be? What can I do in the future, for example?
Okay.
The career.
Okay. Okay. Yes. So she may be thinking. We may see the story from her point of view, or we could say POV. It's often perspective, point of view. So maybe she's thinking about what she wants to do in the future. Maybe she's thinking about her personal life. Maybe she's thinking about her career. Or maybe she's not the focus of this story. Maybe it's a story about the photographer. And we see from his point of view, he's thinking about all day taking these photos and that he needs to sell them and he needs to make money. It might be, for an example, a job advertisement. It may be a kind of picture showing what you will need to do when you are working, for example, as a waiter. So we can see the young waiter in the back, and maybe it's telling about that you need to serve the customers and the guests. You need to be very quiet during photo sessions because we always have these different events. So, I mean, there's many things that could be happening in this story. We might be hearing the point of view of this man. It might be from this woman's perspective. This might be a picture from a news story. Maybe a woman whose husband was lost at sea, for example. And we see this picture in the story showing that she is missing him. She's worried. There's lots of different things that could be happening. Yeah, yes, Anastasia.
I think that's quite strange because we can see in her left hand that she's smoking, actually. And I think that's quite strange in this situation.
Okay. You mean if she's thinking about her husband?
Yes, because just like...
Okay, well, this is a good point. And this may be, I mean, you're kind of thinking about it like a detective. This could be a mystery story. Maybe we're suspicious of this woman. If she's thinking about her husband, why is she smoking? Why is she wearing this beautiful dress? I mean, this could be kind of the first scene of a detective story or a murder mystery.
I have a very strange mind about that picture. Maybe her husband died and it was a very rich person that didn't have any children, and she's trying to be sad about that, but in her heart she's happy that as that she have all his money, and the men that are around her are detectives that suspicious her in the murdering of her husband. Yeah, and she's nervous about that.
Okay, I like this idea. This is a very good version, Alexandra. So this is all about how each of us look at something and we have our own ideas about it. We have our own kind of point of view, and we describe it and think about it in our own way. This is kind of what storytelling is about. So I like all of these examples, that it may be about she's trying to look sad and the detectives suspect her, or it may be any of these other examples. She may be famous. Okay, so we each have our own point of view. The characters have their point of view, and we'll talk about all of this, using this in storytelling. The third part, the third piece, or the third section of the course will be about media and journalism. So, I mean, we said that the second section is nonfiction, which is writing about real things, and journalism is also writing about real things. But it can be a little bit different. Like we said, that as an example of nonfiction writing, it may be advertisement. So maybe the purpose of some nonfiction writing is to sell something. Or maybe the purpose of kind of writing autobiography is for a person to tell their story in their way. They want to promote themselves, and they want to promote an idea of who they are. Journalism is supposed to be about just saying what happened. I mean, of course, it's not always that way, but the idea that journalism is about saying the facts, communicating. So we can see examples of this in newspapers, magazines, TV, radio, like we said, podcasts, social media, internet news sites. We'll look at examples from all of these. We'll talk about how now most people get news from the internet, whether it's from news sites, whether it's from Telegram, whether it's from something that they heard from a friend. Most people now read their news on the internet, not in newspapers or not necessarily from TV. So we'll talk about how this changes journalism and how we read, how we hear examples of news stories now. So here we see a newspaper, the Daily News, and we see the first part, the headline. So the headline, the title of the story, what it should catch our attention. So the headline, journalism, what is it? In this story, this example, we don't have a byline, but the byline tells us who wrote the story. Now, in many traditional newspapers, we would see a byline and we would know who wrote the story. But now, with a lot of internet stories, we don't always know. And we'll talk about this, how we can try to find if a story is real or if a story is a kind of rumor or something like this. Does anyone know this next example, clickbait? Has anyone heard this word?
It's like this thing that people write under their like videos. For example, if they have a lot of like colors, they write something like for epileptics, you don't need to watch it because there are a lot of like colors.
Okay, right. So this could be, it could be a kind of warning. It could be a caption, some small text under a photo or video. It's something which people should read and something which maybe makes them want to click on the video. So yes, it may be a warning that if you're epileptic, don't watch. But maybe this attracts someone else and they say, oh, this video must be interesting. It must be fast and exciting. So clickbait, yes, it's like something that makes people want to click on this story. A hook is the same kind of idea. It's what makes you, a hook is like something that catches you like a fish. So the hook of the story is what makes you want to continue reading, what catches your attention. And like we said, caption is the text under a photo or video. So if this headline says journalism, what is it? This story, it says journalism is reporting information so that citizens can make intelligent decisions for their lives. But journalism, like other forms of writing, is really about telling a story that will interest a reader. The purpose isn't primarily to entertain, and it is not to sell something or convince people to buy. The purpose is to inform, but the reader still needs a reason to read. So when we were talking about fiction, we talked about kind of this background, this inciting incident or conflict, the rising action. Let's look at a little bit of structure for journalism as well. The main part of the story, the clickbait, the headline, the hook is the lead. This is the information we need. Who, what, where, when, and why. What is the story about? Why should we care? Then the body of the story gives us more details. It tells us what happened. It gives us evidence. What is evidence? Who can tell me? What do I mean if I talk about evidence?
It's like their point of view, like why they need to believe in their story.
Why they need to believe in their story. Exactly right. Okay, the background, what happened before the story, details, and quotes. So when we see something inside of these little symbols, these little bits of punctuation, these are quotes, what someone said directly. And then the tail of the story is the summary, the basic idea, what was the story about and the context. What else do we need to know? What else can we learn in the future? This is the tale of the story. So we will talk about all of these different kinds of writing, fiction, nonfiction, journalism, and how we can do them, and how we can be not only better writers, but how we can be better readers, how we can be better listeners, how we can understand more of all of the different kinds of stories that we meet in our lives. So excuse me, let me go to the last page. Okay, so we will be using these two textbooks. The Usborne Creative Writing book, it gives us kind of different structure, different things for all of these types of stories. This creative writing has some different exercises, some different things that we will do. Some will be for homework. Some of them will be exercises that we do together in class and work on and discuss together with each other. And so if we said that storytelling is all about asking questions, I wanted to get to one more type of storytelling. I'm not sure that we'll have time. So before I get to that point, does anyone have any questions?
No.
No? Okay, well, good.
No.
I'm sorry?
No.
No? Okay, well, that's good. So the last thing that we will talk about, it's called riddles. And riddle, it's like a kind of puzzle for your mind. And these are something you have to kind of think about the answer. So if we said the getting information, learning more, it's all about asking questions. A riddle is something like this. So we don't have much time. We have only about a minute. So I will ask you just a simple example. This is a kind of common riddle. It says, what gets shorter as it gets older? What gets shorter as it gets older? Can anyone tell me any idea, or does anyone want to ask me any questions about this? What gets shorter as it gets older?
Time of living.
Okay, time of living. Yes, that's the correct answer. That can be true. Does anyone else have an answer?
Maybe life is getting shorter.
Life,
but
okay.
It's the same as the time of living.
Same as time of living. Okay, but yeah, it's a good idea. Any other answers?
Food.
I'm sorry?
Book. Food.
Okay, food, book. These are all good answers. I was also thinking about pencil or about a candle, but these can also be, we'll do maybe a few of these riddles, which will be a little bit more complicated, but we need to end for now. So I hope that you got a little bit better idea about what the course is about. So this was a demo lesson just to give you some basic information about the course and about what we're going to learn. The class, as I said, it's about 15 weeks long, and it will be every Wednesday, starting from next week, the 10th of February, and it will be from, the plan is from 5:30 p.m. until 7:45 p.m. So I hope that I will see some of you there. Everyone, I like your answers, I like your ideas, so I hope you will join the class. Contact your managers about it, and I hope that I will see you next week. So if you don't have any other questions, thank you very much.
Bye.
I'm sorry?
Okay, bye.
Okay, goodbye.
See you.
Bye, thanks.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. Goodbye. Have a good evening.
Yes, you too.
Thanks.